Number 9. Yoma Fakad. In 2017, a self-proclaimed prostitute from New Jersey named Yoma Fakad was arrested in Miami for allegedly stealing $32,000 worth of valuables from a man's home. Fakad met the victim, Alain René Galette, at a nightclub and accompanied him to his home, where a massage quickly turned into more. Galette awoke hours later and realized that his Rolex, cash, jewelry, and other valuables were missing. Fakad was also nowhere in sight, and Galette began to suspect that he had been drugged and robbed. Police soon caught up with Fakad, who was accused of stealing over $100,000 worth of items from numerous victims over a 2-year span beginning in 2015. To avoid capture, she routinely changed her appearance after committing a crime. Fakad served a 1-year sentence at a Miami jail for the Florida robberies. Shortly after her release, she was extradited to New York City to face charges for a string of thefts she allegedly committed during the same 2-year time period when she robbed men in Florida. While the outcome of her more recent court case is unclear, records show that she is not currently incarcerated in New York. Number 8. Monica De Jesus and Justin Harris. During the early morning hours one day in April 2017, police in Chester County, Pennsylvania, responded to a call about a robbery at a home in East Goshen Township. The victims told police that a gun-toting intruder, later identified as 36-year-old Justin Harris, had kicked in their door. One of the 2 residents at the home managed to overpower Harris by hitting him in the face with a fireplace poker, while another household member called 911. Meanwhile, a second suspect, 22-year-old Monica De Jesus, allegedly picked up the gun and pointed it in their direction. The suspects eventually fled the scene but were tracked down and arrested a short while later. Police found the victim's stolen property in their possession. De Jesus initially claimed that one of the men who lived at the home had forced himself on her, but investigators found evidence that she was a prostitute who had traveled to the residence from Philadelphia to meet a client. She was allegedly angry because the client didn't pay. According to authorities, De Jesus left the house and called Harris, who was waiting in a nearby parking lot, and the pair returned to the home to collect what they felt was owed to them. They were charged with a litany of crimes, including robbery, burglary, aggravated assault, simple assault, prostitution, making terroristic threats, theft by unlawful taking, receiving stolen property, criminal conspiracy, and harassment. Number 7. Kyle Walker. During the early stages of the coronavirus pandemic in 2020, British pro soccer player Kyle Walker put his foot in his mouth in one of the most embarrassing ways possible. Just hours after violating social distancing policies by bringing prostitutes into his home, he posted a statement on Instagram urging people to follow lockdown rules. Of course, at the time, the public was unaware of what he had been up to the previous night. Walker was called out on his hypocrisy less than 2 weeks later when one of the hired women, 21-year-old Louise McNamara, told the UK Sun about the gathering. She said that Walker and a friend paid her and a Portuguese courtesan around $2,700 for their services, and that they left at 2 a.m. after spending around 3.5 hours at the residence. McNamara said that Walker tried to conceal his identity during the meeting, but his friend slipped by calling him Kai and mentioning that he was a soccer player. She discreetly snapped a photo of the pro footballer paying her, which she later turned over to the media as proof of the encounter. Walker publicly apologized for his actions, which happened during what appeared to be a downward spiral toward rock bottom. Just months earlier, he broke up with his girlfriend after getting another woman pregnant. In the weeks after the prostitute incident, he was accused of violating lockdown restrictions on multiple occasions, including by taking a walk with his neighbors. In May 2023, Walker allegedly exposed himself to a woman at a club, but was not criminally charged, and he's managed to keep his career intact despite his controversial behavior. Number 6. Monica Fowry. In October 2015, a 34-year-old military wife named Monica Fowry was devastated to learn that her husband was cheating on her. Fowry's Royal Marine husband, Wouter, came clean about his affair with a younger woman named Hannah Stokes, who he had met about a month earlier. Crushed by the news, Monica left the couple's home in the English city of Plymouth to spend the night with some friends and process her new reality. Monica, who was born in Poland, met her South African-born husband at a pub in Germany in 2004. She fell hard for Wouter and was still deeply in love with him 13 years later when he returned from a military training exercise in the United States and admitted to his infidelity. Simply put, Monica was blindsided by the confession. She didn't see it coming, even though Wouter had been acting increasingly distant in recent weeks in an effort to push her away. The heartbroken housewife was already in a poor mental state when she returned home the next day and walked in to find Stokes in her marital bed, at which point she lost all self-control. Monica poured boiling water over Hannah's head and chest, causing serious burns and permanent hearing damage as the young woman screamed in agonizing pain and begged her attacker to stop. Wouter overheard the commotion and rushed into the room, where he found his wife grabbing his mistress by the hair. Authorities arrested Monica on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm with intent. During her trial, she claimed that she didn't remember committing the attack, but expressed deep remorse for her actions. Monica's supporters and even the judge acknowledged that her violent behavior was completely out of character. Those who knew Monica personally described her as an upstanding person who they would have never pictured ending up in a situation like this. No matter how well liked she was, however, it didn't change the fact that she had caused serious damage to someone's life. Hannah Stokes testified about the excruciating pain and indescribable fear she experienced during the attack and her continued suffering afterward. She admitted that she made a poor decision by having an affair with a married man, but said that she didn't think she deserved to suffer from lifelong injuries for her mistake. A jury found Monica guilty as charged, and she was sentenced to 5 years in prison. She and Wouter are now divorced, and the relationship between Wouter and Stokes is also over. Number 5. The world's laziest cheater. In 2022, a woman named Amy revealed that she had awoken to her husband being intimate with another woman in the very same bed. She told iHeartRadio's talk program Will and Woody for the drive home that her husband had brought a woman home earlier that night and introduced her as a friend. He said that the guest had nowhere to go and asked if she could crash on the couch. At that point, Amy and her husband had been together for 24 years. She trusted him and had no reason to suspect that he was being dishonest, and she welcomed the woman into their home. As it turned out, the so-called friend was actually Amy's husband's mistress, and he was apparently daring enough to go at it with the woman while Amy was asleep, presumably thinking that they could get away with it if they were quiet enough. The talk show's hosts were stunned that Amy's husband hadn't chosen a more discreet location for the encounter. While only the cheater himself knows the answer to that question, the circumstances led to him being labeled as the world's laziest cheater. By the time Amy went public with her experience, she had moved past it emotionally. She said that in the end, it worked out for the best because she ended the marriage and found someone she was incredibly happy with. It's unclear what her ex-husband is up to these days or what happened with the relationship with his mistress. Number 4. Christina Joy Rivera. In what was later described as a booty call gone wrong, a Florida man named Ronald Koch was in the middle of getting busy with a female guest one morning in 2017 when his ex barged into his St. Petersburg home. The suspect, 27-year-old Christina Joy Rivera, was accused of forcing her way into the residence at around 5:00 a.m. and attacking Koch's new girlfriend, Julie Thomas. According to an arrest report, Rivera entered the bedroom without saying a word and began punching Thomas in the face. Responding deputies arrived to find Thomas bleeding and suffering from minor injuries. Koch told police that he had received text messages from Rivera shortly before the incident, asking if she could come over and expressing her desire for intimacy. He ignored the messages, and instead of taking it as a hint that Koch wasn't interested in seeing her, Rivera allegedly showed up uninvited. The accused intruder denied the assault and told law enforcement that she had been invited over to the residence, but deputies didn't buy the story. Just months after serving time in jail for a DUI charge involving property damage, Rivera was booked into custody on suspicion of burglary with assault or battery. She also had prior convictions for marijuana possession, theft, public urination, and violating probation. While the outcome of Rivera's case is unclear, it's probably safe to assume that her status as a repeat offender didn't do her any favors with the judge who oversaw the booty call case. Number 3. Community punishes cheating husband. When a woman in southern China found out that her husband was cheating on her in November 2020, civilians decided to take justice into her own hands. In a shocking encounter that was captured on camera, 4 men barged into the man's home while he was in bed with his mistress. They strapped the partially dressed philanderer into a cage and tossed it into a nearby river. The practice, which loosely translates to dip in a pig cage, was commonly carried out during ancient times as an unofficial form of punishment against adulterers. It was traditionally performed with the intention of drowning the cheating party, but in this particular case, police were alerted to the situation in time to rescue the man. By the time the story broke, authorities had arrested 4 suspects and an investigation into the incident was underway. Unfortunately, the story seems to both start and end there, and it's unclear whether the suspects were convicted of any crimes. Number 2. Tyre Russell. Shortly before dawn one day in August 2019, a panicked man entered a Woodbury, New Jersey police station and said he had just escaped from his burning house. He was half-dressed, covered in soot from head to toe, and suffering from first and second-degree burns as he coughed and gasped for air. Firefighters rushed to the scene, where they rescued the man's dog and doused the blaze. A search of the victim's phone quickly pointed investigators in the direction of 29-year-old Tyre Russell, who the victim described as his side chick. The man had invited Russell over to his home earlier that day for a booty call, but had fallen asleep by the time she called him back. His phone contained 8 recent missed calls from Russell, along with rage-filled text messages wishing death on the victim and accusing him of wasting Russell's money by inviting her over and not answering the door. According to law enforcement, security footage from a nearby gas station showed Russell buying lighter fluid, matches, and a lighter shortly before the fire. She was also reportedly captured on camera as she returned to the residence and approached the back door. Just minutes later, the house was engulfed in flames. By the time the victim awoke to the smoke and flames, it was impossible for him to simply walk out the door. He escaped through a window and hightailed it to the police station. Russell was charged with aggravated arson, aggravated assault, endangering with a substantial risk of death, and criminal mischief. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. Number 1. Carl Deutsch. 50-year-old Carl Deutsch and his girlfriend were getting busy in the bedroom at his Pennsylvania apartment one day in 2011 when state police raided the home. Armed with a warrant, law enforcement was looking for evidence that Deutsch had been manufacturing methamphetamine inside the residence. Deutsch claimed that the bust caught him completely off guard. He later told the judge overseeing his case that he scrambled to cover himself while police allegedly forced him to the floor and stomped on his leg. During his court proceedings, he accused the cops of stomping on his leg and breaking it, causing injuries that led to a staph infection and required multiple reconstructive surgeries. Law enforcement denied attacking Deutsch and accused him of trying to disarm officers twice during the arrest. The police also claimed that they warned the defendant about the impending raid from outside using a loudspeaker. Deutsch continued to dispute these assertions, arguing that he wouldn't have been naked in bed with his girlfriend if the police had announced that they were about to enter the home. Throughout the case, the judge seemed to notice the defendant's tendency to blame others and shirk his responsibility for the messy situations he landed himself in. She had a hard time believing Deutsch's claim that he didn't use methamphetamine, especially since the police found chemicals for making the drug inside his house during the raid. The judge was also unswayed by his allegation that a prescription medication caused him to falsely test positive for drugs. Deutsch pleaded no contest to 2 counts of conspiracy to manufacture methamphetamine and was sentenced to just under a year in jail.
8. Kenneth Edward Tank. Father of 2, Kenneth Edward Tank left a Minnesota bar on a cold winter night in 1971 and was never seen again. The 28-year-old, who worked as an insurance adjuster, had just quit his job and was last seen leaving Ralph's Corner Bar in Moorhead on foot in early December. From what anyone could tell, he was simply on his way home, but he never made it there, sparking a mystery that remains unsolved more than a half-century later. Temperatures were well below freezing when Kenneth vanished, but because his body was never found, the possibility that he froze to death was quickly ruled out by his loved ones. At the same time, taxi drivers were unable to identify Kenneth as one of their customers, ruling out the likelihood that he took a cab home. And, according to his wife, the pair didn't have any marital issues. He also loved his kids deeply, so it was unlikely that he engineered his own disappearance and started a new life under a different identity. In the years following Kenneth's disappearance, the police released few details about the case, leaving a big fat question mark on what really happened to him. And while he's been declared legally dead by the court, he's still classified as a missing person. In early 2023, reporters from the Duluth News Tribune did their own digging and found some information that they believe sheds new light on the baffling case. A police report they obtained mentions the concerning possibility that Kenneth was targeted by disgruntled customers with ties to organized crime. The report also stated that he struggled to emotionally cope with denying claims to customers who he felt deserved to collect money, which is what prompted him to quit his job. The man's family members reportedly told the cops that Kenneth might have walked away from his job because he felt his family was in danger. One relative who asked to remain anonymous told the Tribune that Kenneth and his wife had received threatening phone calls in the weeks before he disappeared. They were so worried by the nature of the calls that they made plans to move out of state. There were also rumors that he'd upset members of a local motorcycle gang. Unfortunately, it seems as though all anyone can do for now is speculate on what likely happened to Kenneth. The case has since gone cold, but the local police department is still taking tips just in case anyone decides to come forward with new details that could help solve the mystery. 7. Mysterious druggings and deaths. At least 5 customers were fatally drugged with narcotics at LGBTQ-friendly bars in Manhattan over a several-month period starting in 2022. Police believe different criminal crews, working independently of one another, specifically targeted customers at gay bars. These organized groups use similar tactics, including stealthily slipping drugs into victims' drinks, causing them to fall unconscious, then robbing them of their phones, wallets, and other valuables. In some cases, the perpetrators drain the victims' bank accounts using their digital banking information. On St. Patrick's Day in 2022, a 29-year-old chef named Nerbu Sherpa was found dead on a sidewalk after leaving a bar where he'd celebrated the holiday. The following month, 25-year-old social worker Julio Ramirez died in a taxi after leaving a bar. Then, in May, a 33-year-old political consultant named John Umberger was found dead from an apparent drug overdose in a townhouse where he was staying during a visit from Washington, D.C. Surveillance footage from earlier that night showed a group of men holding him up at a club where he'd gone out drinking, and money was missing from his bank account. In July, 26-year-old Ardajan Berisha and a friend of his blacked out on the sidewalk after a night out drinking together. Sadly, Berisha didn't survive. Some victims who were lucky enough to wake up after being drugged and robbed came forward and reported the crimes. In late 2022, Bronx resident Kenwood Allen was charged in connection with the deaths of Sherpa and Berisha. He's accused of administering the highly dangerous drug fentanyl to the 2 victims, along with several others who survived. Unfortunately, the rest of the crimes remain unsolved, but the NYPD has made it clear that they're still working the cases and are determined to bring the rest of the perpetrators to justice. 6. Jessica Lally. During a night out with some friends in early 2022, 26-year-old bride-to-be Jessica Lally suffered a completely unexpected medical emergency. They were at an American-themed bar in Sheffield, England, when Jessica decided to try riding the mechanical bull. Like most people who give it a whirl, she eventually fell from the apparatus. But unlike most, she suffered a fatal heart attack during the fall. Paramedics tried to revive her, but they were unable to do so. Jessica didn't drink much before the deadly accident, according to her mum, Joan, who spoke with the UK Sun. The young woman and her pals had decided to stop in at the bar after having dinner elsewhere. She was working as a manager at a Pandora jewelry store and was engaged to get married when her life was abruptly cut short. However, the tragedy wasn't the mechanical bull's fault either. According to the bar manager, the bull was at its lowest speed when Jessica fell and went into cardiac arrest. He also said that she passed all the necessary safety checks that the bar requires before letting someone on the bull. At some point during the ride, she lost consciousness and slipped off. For a week following the tragedy, the bar closed so law enforcement could investigate and so employees could recover from the shock of the incident. A medical examiner concluded that Jessica's cause of death wasn't related to the bull. In the meantime, her friends and family members campaigned for more emergency defibrillators to be available in public places, which could potentially save lives in the future. They even set up a fundraiser to help pay for the equipment, which was extremely helpful to the community since there weren't many defibrillators around for emergency use. 5. Nicole Flanigan. 42-year-old Nicole Flanigan was working as an escort in New York City when she was found dead in 2021. She was naked and her body had been stuffed into a 55-gallon plastic drum. Her friend, Katrina Galloway, told the New York Post that the troubled woman had a great life until she made a series of wrong decisions. After graduating high school, Flanigan worked as a receptionist for a short period of time. The Greenwich, Connecticut native was always put together and looked nice, according to Galloway, who met Flanigan about 30 years before her death. But at some point, the attractive young woman reportedly diverted away from her path to success and began stripping at clubs in Brooklyn and Queens. Galloway said that Flanigan was never the same after that. Exotic dancing paved the way to escorting, and drugs and alcohol seemed to play a role in her inherently dangerous lifestyle. Flanigan also had 3 kids by 3 different men, the youngest of whom was only 6 or 7 years old when she mysteriously turned up dead. She was last seen alive outside a New York City apartment about a week before her remains were found in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey. Authorities charged 29-year-old Akelia Barker with helping to move or conceal Flanigan's remains. Prison records show that Parker is serving a maximum 9-year sentence in connection with the case. He could be paroled by the end of 2023 or as late as 2029. Unfortunately, the exact details surrounding Flanigan's death and Parker's alleged involvement remain unclear. 4. Gangland kidnapping. In a mysterious missing persons case that can only be described as both bizarre and terrifying, 11 customers disappeared from an after-hours bar in Mexico City in mid-2013. Before they vanished, they were last seen at an establishment called Heaven in the upscale Zona Rosa district on May 26th. At least one reluctant witness reported seeing several individuals being crammed into SUVs by armed men in the morning daylight. Guadalupe Dominguez, a relative of one of the victims, told CNN that she heard the eyewitness account from a young man who escaped from the captors. However, authorities were quick to dismiss these claims, arguing that there was no evidence of any kidnappings occurring during the time the customers went missing. But they also didn't offer any better explanations for how nearly a dozen people vanished all at once. Because of this, the victims' loved ones quickly became frustrated with the lack of eyewitnesses who were willing to come forward. One rumor claimed that the bar's owner warned the people inside there that there was going to be a police operation. He turned the lights off and sent everyone outside, where the SUVs and armed abductors were allegedly waiting. Police denied conducting any operations outside the bar that day, but stuck to their story that there were no signs of a kidnapping taking place. And of course, the bar's surveillance cameras conveniently weren't working that day. A little over a month later, 13 human bodies, including several of the kidnapping victims, were found in a mass grave at a ranch outside the city. Investigators determined that the abductions were likely gang-related and had something to do with a drug-related rivalry between 2 different groups. A few of the victims were related to known gangsters, but the police said they were unable to identify any connections between the gang members and the crime. The charred remains of one of the suspects, Dax Rodriguez Ledesma, were found around the same time that the victims' bodies were discovered. This was a shocking, but not necessarily uncommon case. According to the BBC, an estimated 70,000 people died in gang-related violence in Mexico in the 6 years leading up to the mass kidnapping. And unfortunately, it's nothing new for people to go missing in Mexico. However, this case seemed to get a lot of publicity for the sheer number of people who vanished all at one time, and for the suspicious circumstances surrounding their disappearances. 3. The disappearance of Brian Schaffer. To celebrate the first night of spring break in 2006, 27-year-old medical school student Brian Schaffer went out bar hopping in Columbus, Ohio, with his roommate and some of his other friends. Toward the end of the night, they decided to return to a bar they'd been drinking at earlier, the Ugly Tuna Saloona, for a nightcap. The last known recording of the young man showed him speaking with 2 women outside the bar just before 2 a.m. He looked relaxed and nothing seemed amiss. And yet, he vanished into thin air not too long after. He planned on proposing to his girlfriend Alexis Wagoner during an upcoming trip to Miami, but she never heard from him again after that night out, and the trip obviously never happened. The final exchange between Alexis and Brian happened just hours before he disappeared, when he confirmed their travel plans and told his girlfriend that he loved her. After he went missing from outside the bar, his friends tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. He never returned to his apartment, and calls from his family went unanswered, and after that night, he was never seen again. When Brian missed his flight to Miami 2 days after he vanished, the police officially designated him as a missing person and began searching, unfortunately to no avail. A thorough investigation failed to turn up even a single sign of him beyond the surveillance footage from outside the Ugly Tuna Saloona. He remains missing to this day, leaving his loved ones to wonder how a night of blowing off steam after finals could end in such a mystifying tragedy. There's a $100,000 reward being offered to anyone who can help lead law enforcement to Brian's whereabouts, but so far nobody's provided any clues that could lead to his safe return. 2. Law student vanishes. 29-year-old law student Jordan Taylor vanished from a gay bar in Manhattan in early 2023 and has been missing ever since. He lived in Queens at the time and was last seen near his apartment on the afternoon of January the 6th. The young man left a barbershop in the middle of getting his hair cut and proceeded to the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan, according to his phone's data. His last known location was in Hell's Kitchen during the early morning hours of January 7th. The missing man's brother, Alton, told NBC that he thought it was weird when he noticed that Jordan spent 3 hours at the bus terminal. He assumed his brother was there to meet someone, but he didn't know for sure why Jordan was at Port Authority. His phone and wallet were found miles apart from one another in 2 different places in Manhattan several hours after he was reported missing. The phone appeared in Hell's Kitchen, not far from the bar he visited that night, while the wallet was found more than 3 miles away near the Goldman Sachs building in Battery Park City. Neither Jordan's friends nor his family have heard from him since the hours before he disappeared, leaving them extremely concerned. And while the first-year law student's loved ones are trying to hold out hope that he's alive, they've started to fear the worst. Apparently, it's completely unlike him not to reach out to them for a few days, let alone for more than a month. They're hoping a member of the public comes forward with information that'll help to bring him home safely. But for now, Jordan Taylor's disappearance remains a mystery. 1. The strange death of George Musser. 20-year-old college student George Musser didn't let the harsh winter weather stop him from going to a bar in Stillwater, Minnesota, the day before Christmas Eve in 2022. He was last seen alive at the establishment just outside the Minneapolis-St. Paul area at around 2 a.m. on Christmas Eve. At the time, temperatures were well below freezing, yet George didn't wear a jacket that evening. His wallet and keys were found outside near the bar, but nobody could figure out where he went. And their concern only grew as an Arctic blast blew through the region, reminding them that he couldn't possibly survive for long outdoors. Sadly, he was found dead at around 7 p.m. on Christmas Day in neighboring Baytown Township, 2 miles away from the bar he vanished from. According to the Washington County Sheriff's Office, surveillance footage showed someone matching George's description walking through the streets around the time he disappeared. Evidence suggested that he died from the cold weather, but it's unclear why he went wandering on foot in the blistering cold without proper outerwear.
Thanks for watching. What would be worse, having your crazy ex show up while you're in the company of a new suitor, or having the police barge in while you're entertaining a guest because your crazy ex made a false 911 call about an emergency at your home? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.